Hello, and welcome to my channel. Prepare for a night of terror, psychosis, cults, night stalkers, hostages, let's not forget massacres. A night when you're in someone's unconscious mind, hoping and praying you can run away from the creepy person in your backyard, or maybe escape from the deranged person holding you hostage. Being the audience yourself, you start to ask yourself, how did I get into this transcendental science? It'll trap you in your own mind like a prisoner. Lock your doors, say your prayers, stay out of the driveway, be aware of the bumps in the night, and the prickles in back of your neck during a good night's sleep.
I'm a single woman about to turn 40, and I haven't dated in quite a while because I've been pretty busy focusing on myself with my waist training business skyrocketing on social media. But I cannot lie, it's been pretty dreadful being a loner for the past 3 years. One day on Facebook, I received a message from a guy who I thought was decently handsome. He didn't tell me much about himself, except that he worked at a hospital. But he then told me he was a surgical oncologist. And I thought it was interesting. Not that I needed someone with a good job, but there were times where I thought my business could wipe out any minute now. So on a Friday evening, I decided to meet my date at a restaurant in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. Happy and dolled up, I drowned myself in about 3 glasses of champagne, waiting half an hour for him to arrive. And to tell you the truth, he didn't look much like the picture I saw on his Facebook. He definitely looked 100 pounds overweight and had a malicious smile. Within an hour of him warming up to me and waiting for our food, he started telling me that he wanted to know me better and for me to go to his house that night. I quickly said no, I couldn't do that. I barely know you. He slowly turns his head grinning and looks at me with a disturbing stare. When the waiter finally arrived with our food, I noticed he ordered a very rare steak. Just looking at it made me gag. I quickly dived into my mashed potatoes and calamari. Out of nowhere, he asked me, "You know what makes me very mad?" I slowly raise my head and ask, "What?" He takes his knife and disturbingly starts stabbing his rare steak. Then says, "When I get rejected," then he starts grunting. All of a sudden, my stomach started twisting and I felt my adrenaline going up. He then starts whispering to himself and says, "I love how the blood comes out when I poke it, just like my ex-wife," and disturbingly began to chuckle. He starts telling me he accidentally punctured a wrong artery when operating his wife. I was starting to freak out and stood quiet for minutes as I watched him aggressively cut his steak while muttering and chewing super loud. I decided it was time to leave and asked if he wanted me to go half and half on the bill. He yells out no while slamming on the table. A few people just stared with furrowed looks. I got up and said have a good night. So I got into my car and drove to my apartment in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. I wasn't sure if he had his car parked out, but I noticed while I was on a belt parkway, someone was driving in back of me pretty slow. I started making assumptions about what if it's him, but I ignored it and kept going. Within 10 minutes of finally arriving, I parked my car in front of the house. I feel someone tapping me. It was the same creep from the restaurant. His eyes were completely rolled up, and he was clenching his jaw. He tells me, "You are a pretty girl but with a very nasty attitude." I see he pulls out what looks like an incision blade. I fell against the door and told him to please leave me alone. I just wanted to get into my house and call it a night. He stays still like a creepy villain and stares at me, and then he starts to giggle. I literally screamed out loud, "Please just leave me alone." And I did it loudly purposely so that anyone in my neighborhood would hear me and come to my rescue. It was fortunate my nosy neighbor, about 70 years old, who hated noise, came out of her house and yelled, "What is going on out there?" The creep looked back and saw my neighbor. "Drop that or I'll call the cops." She really did help because the super to her building came out to see what was going on. He ended up running back to his car. Even though he got away, cops were still called, and he was on the loose. Every day I pray I never see him again. But he already knows where I live. I haven't dated much because I was with my ex-fiance for about 5 years. But sadly it wasn't going well, so we called it quits a month before our anniversary. I tried to do so much to distract my mind so that I wouldn't think about him. I finally decided to go on a date with someone who I met at a club about a week ago. I decided to meet him at a Turkish restaurant since it was one of my favorite cuisines. I didn't think much of the guy except that he was pretty good looking and tall with the perfect muscular physique. He didn't cross me the wrong way at all, and even told me that he was a personal trainer, trying to start his own business as a fitness coach. I loved his ambition and the way he talked. He seemed determined and definitely was trying to reach his goals. I noticed he kept forcing me to drink that night. He forced me to drink more shots of vodka, but I told him to slow down because I wanted to enjoy the night. He shrugged and fell back. I noticed he was looking at underage porn on his phone. It looked like he was looking at minors from Brazil, and I heard him saying, "God, I'd do anything to get my hands on that." My eyes widened, and I tried getting up from the chair, but he grabbed me by the wrist and asked, "Where you going?" I stood frozen and couldn't even make up a lie because I was weirded out. So I just faked a smile and sat back down. He started caressing my leg and poured me another shot of vodka. Just to calm my nerves, I jugged it and puckered my face. He started asking me, how would it feel to be dined and taken to a different country? I wasn't comprehending at all and asked him why would he ask me that. He started telling me that with my figure, I can make millions of dollars and live like a queen, but I couldn't tell anyone what kind of business he wanted me to get into. I tried getting up and quickly escaping, but I began to feel drowsy. The whole room began spinning and I couldn't see straight. It felt like my date was walking me out of the restaurant and directing me where to walk. After being thrown into the back seat of a car, that is when I blacked out. 20 minutes later, I woke up with a throbbing headache and realized my mouth was taped and my hands were tied. I also felt like my abdomen and other areas of my body were swollen and bruised. I tried screaming, but my mouth was taped heavily. I had no idea where I was, but it was pitch black and I couldn't move. Out of nowhere, someone opens the door, and I realized I was inside of a janitor's closet. A maintenance guy jumps and asks, "What are you doing in here? Are you okay?" I shook my head and he untied me. I also called the cops and described the guy I went on a date with. The maintenance guy who untied me told me that my date used to work at this location he found me in, and that he was fired for attempted sexual assault on someone who worked in the building.
Final story.
21 years old and I'm still learning about dating life. The last 5 years went pretty bad because the guys turned out to be straight assholes and just wanted a friend with beneficial needs. So I decided to attend a speed dating event on Meetup. Finally making my way into the event, I maintained an open mind. I was greeted at the door by the event planner and brought to a table with my welcome package and grabbed my drink ticket. Me and the rest of the girls got comfy and relaxed. When the gentleman entered, I was pretty nervous and took a big chug out of my wine glass. I came across a good-looking guy who was dressed in an Armani suit and looked like $1 million. Now, I may sound stupid, but I know he was definitely my first choice. I couldn't keep my eye off of him after we rotated. When it was over, I went over to the guy and gave him my number. We both couldn't help but notice our strong chemistry. After all, he was charming, but seductive at the same time. He suggested that we ditch that place and go out for dinner. I agreed and went to Koreatown with him. It was soothing and comforting while he wined and dined me. I never really fell into a guy so fast on the first night, but I was young and very naive. He started playing footsies with me under the table, looking sort of aroused. It turns out he was an independent entrepreneur with photography. I thought it was pretty interesting. He then tells me he's got the greatest connections and sources to be at a higher level. Again, I will say how naive I was to actually believe it, and the fact that I was struggling trying to get into modeling. So I showed him my profile and it raised his eyebrow. He gave me a big wet kiss and suggested that we go back to his place to discuss more. I went along with it and got into the cab. As I entered his apartment, he began to put on jazz music, preparing us margaritas. I just looked around the house and observed the whole apartment. He approaches me and starts kissing me, then slowly whispers in my ear. "You know what would help sell more?" he asked. I smiled and said, "What?" "If you got undressed." I chuckled and shook my head. I noticed he slowly pulled out a kitchen knife he had in his other hand. "Maybe a little blood," he said. I tried running away, but he slapped me and I fell onto the couch. "I want to see drip from your neck to your thighs." He swiped his lips from left to right and began taking photos non-stop while I panicked. I stuttered and said, I just need to freshen up. Can I use the bathroom?" He begins lighting a cigarette, then slowly nods. I go to the bathroom while my limbs began to shake and I felt so unstable. I couldn't believe his plan was to kill me and then take photos of me. So I began to sob and puke. I tried pulling myself together, but I knew I had to find a way to escape. So I slowly opened the door and looked through the crack. He looked like he was doing a few bumps of cocaine and rounding his shoulders. He also started swinging the knife around and doing stabbing motions. I hear him yell out, "Pow, I'm gonna stab her like this. I can't wait." I guess he was practicing in front of the mirror how he's going to stab me. I got out of the bathroom trying to make my way to the door to escape. And I noticed the closet halfway open, and I heard a mutter. I also saw that the bag moved. Then it sounded like a moaning and groaning. I gasped and struggled getting the chain off the door. I heard, "Hey!" to turn the knob and escape.